Coming to this interesting, challenging, important plenary this morning. We are very fortunate to have assembled a very distinguished panel, a panel of major industry leaders, and it would be quite an experience for all of us to listen to how they strategize for the future. Some of you probably have read the topic of the plenary today. I'm going to slowly read it so you can understand, because that would be basically most of my opening remarks. And the topic itself really explains what this plenary is going to be all about. The title of the plenary is Major Space Markets in the Next 20 Years and the Corporate Approaches for Success. Each panel member is going to take 5 to 7 minutes. And that will be followed by questions from you, and we should have this plenary finished in about 1 hour. The subject, as I had described for the panel members, the context, I'll read that too. The increasing consolidation of the space industry, the emergence of new spacefaring nations such as India and China, and the increased competition they bring, the challenges in the space transportation industry, the increased blurring between civilian versus military space activities, not to mention new advances and opportunities in space tourism, on-orbit servicing. These are all the factors that are changing the commercial landscape. These new dynamics are resulting in traditional markets evolving to face new challenges while also creating new markets and new opportunities. Recognizing these challenges in the space environment, panelists will be sharing their views as to what challenges they see for the current and evolving and new space markets, and what they are doing in their own companies so that they can stay in business for next 20 years, and what are the corporate approaches they are using for their success. And we'll start from Mr. Francois Auque, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Astrium in France. Mr. Auque.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I would like to thank, of course, the organizer. From what I know from the Astrium people in the technical sessions, this Congress is already a success. Second, I would like to mention my special pleasure to be in Spain, because Spain is a mother or a father country of EADS. And we are very impressed by the ambition of Spain for space, which is consistent with the tremendous dynamism of this country that you can see, by the way, all around here. I would like to start with 3 observations, and then maybe to share the key words which lead the strategy of our company, Astrium, the EADS branch of space. First observation, obviously, making prediction for 20 years is something which is challenging, especially when I look at what has been happening in the last 20 years. Just, I want to mention that 25 years ago, the first shuttle was launched, Columbia, and I would like also to mention that 20 years ago, less than 20 years ago, Ariane 5 was decided. So you can see all what has happened during this period, which was not expected at all. Most of it, by the way, was not expected. Second observation, I would like to maybe to share with you what has been the business model of the last 20 years, because the world market is a little bit challenging also for space. For me, during the last 20 years, we have to distinguish between space systems and services. Space systems, the rationale for decisions has not been mainly driven by market expectations. reasons. The main reasons which led decisions in building space systems were sovereignty, were search for new scientific frontiers, were environment reasons, power reasons, whatsoever. Second, main markets have been by far government markets. There were commercial applications and commercial success, which were significant. Ariane is one, commercial telecom is one, but they were, if I may be provocative, incidental. Downstream services, on the contrary, were clearly commercially driven and developed thanks to the taxpayer money which was invested in infrastructure, that is, in space systems. And without infrastructure, there would not have been downstream services. Without motorways, there would not have been car industry. And we, in the business of designing space systems, we are not in the car industry. We are in the public works industry who build the motorways. Third observation, is this business model changing? Will it dramatically change in the next 20 years? If I knew, of course, I would be very rich and I would not attend this session. But my feeling, my gut feeling is that it will not change dramatically. What I mean is that I believe that space infrastructure, space systems, will be more privately funded through schemes like PPP, thanks to new fields, maybe space tourism, thanks to the development of telecommunication at large, but it will remain government funded. And more precisely, infrastructure, space systems, will be existing in the countries where there will be ambition from nations to build those systems. And so the public work industry will concentrate on the countries where this ambition is. As far as downstream is concerned, my gut feeling is that we will see an explosion of downstream services. Because I think that the convergence of use of Earth observation, navigation, and telecommunication might trigger a revolution which might have some taste of what was the Internet revolution. And this revolution is the revolution of mobility. So, what are the key drivers of Astrium in this environment? Very quickly, 4 key drivers. First one, efficiency, of course. Space is a world of competition, and we have to be more and more competitive. I will not insist on the huge industrial optimization that we are pursuing every day in our 5 European parent countries. But I want to insist on one key element of efficiency, which is innovation. We are lucky enough to have been able to fund some key innovative products. I want maybe to focus on flexible payload with our Inmarsat and Skynet family, laser links, all which is linked about Earth observation where we are world leaders. So efficiency is a preliminary condition to prepare the future. Second, duality. Duality between defense and civil applications. Our design office designs both Ariane and the French ballistic missiles. And a lot of applications which are used in the civil world are derived from ballistic, especially composite materials. Duality also in services, of course. Earth observation is an example. Duality in funding. And Arianespace is the first world private partnership. Simply, at that time, the word was not invented. But the concept was invented. Third word, cooperation. Cooperation, of course. We are condemned to cooperation. Cooperation first within Europe. And can tell you how painful it is to optimize an industrial tool within 5 countries, Spain, France, Germany, UK, Netherlands, completed with long-lasting partnership with Italy, Sweden, Belgium, Switzerland. I think that as far as European cooperation is concerned, we have 2 challenges ahead of us. First, enlarging cooperation to newcomers, new European commerce. And second, developing a true concept of security and defense. But cooperation goes far beyond Europe, fortunately. Cooperation with the US on the space station, on ballistic missile. I'm very proud that Astrium has been winning the NATO competition for ballistic missile architecture together with SAIC, US very prestigious company. Cooperation with Russia. We have been pioneer in EADS of cooperation with Russia, with Starsem, Soyuz in Kourou, Rocket. We have created a company with a very powerful and promising Russian partner, Ernie Capet, on satellites, Synertech. Cooperation also, we believe that we can extend with Russia, and there is a huge opportunity, which is the development of the future human-rated launcher or vehicle, whatever it is. Cooperation with India, with our joint venture with ISRO, which has been extremely successful, and only 1 year after being created, already selling 2 satellites with Indian platform to 2 very prestigious customers. Last but not least, world services. I am a services addict. We, services, already account for 1/3 of our EBIT. We have a unique position, world position today in terms of military telecommunication services. We are the sole company in the world to be an operator of military telecommunication services and one-stop shop for MODs. And again, I believe that navigation, GMES, will dramatically trigger the development of services. So, having been too long as always, future will be bright for space, can be bright for space systems in nations who will retain ambition, and only those who will retain ambition. And in services, there will be room for a huge variety of players all along the value chain.
Our next speaker is Iskander. He's the Vice President and General Manager of MDA Systems, Space Systems.
Good morning. Buenos dias. Thank you, Dr. Jha. I just got to figure with Valerie's help here how to, I have a presentation to do. Merci, Valerie. Good morning. I'm going to be a bit more bold than Francois. I'm going to try to predict the future for space. One way of looking at the future is to take a top-down approach to this and look at macro trends that persisted over the last few decades, and I boldly predict that they will continue in the future. Environmental trends, we all know about them. Global warming, hurricanes, pollution, ozone depletion, all of that actually is happening and will continue to persist. Next, demographicals and economical drivers, explosion in populations, resource depletion, and the need to find other sources of resource either here or on other planets, the information society and the shift in the economy itself. And as Francois said, political drivers have been and will continue to be dominant. I am not sure about this one for the next 20 years or maybe 10, but certainly the last few years have proven to be drivers for a lot of economical and other sectors. National security, defense, continued polarization are big drivers. If you look at space-based solutions, you will quickly come to, you being in the space sector, the fact that the space offers tremendous opportunity, effective solutions. It offers options that in my view, and I admit I am biased, are superior to other solutions that may be offered by other sectors. So the strategic value of space and space solutions has increased and will continue to increase to address the critical priorities driven by the top-down trends that we just spoke to. So you get higher strategic value for space, you get more and more money, as Francois said, coming in from governments and private sector, moving into the space sector. Another bold prediction, and it's not really that bold, it's already happening as we speak. Companies are moving into space, especially small size companies are all appearing everywhere in Canada, Europe, US, and other places. And also countries, new countries are emerging into space. Korea, Malaysia, the drive in Spain, the re-emphasizing of space in Spain is just another indication of that. I look at simplistic markets. I'm just going to cover government markets in general, and the next slide will cover commercial markets, government markets being science, exploration, and of course Earth observation and communication for military application in particular. From an industrialist point of view, I think the borders are getting tighter, especially that I'm coming from Canada. The borders are getting harder to cross. So physical presence in other markets is becoming more important. That's one strategy we're looking at. This is one of the biggest challenges I think we have, and that is, whilst it's obvious to me and others that space solutions are really one of the best options to address critical needs, this is not very obvious at the political level in many countries. We need to work with our political leaders in all countries to enhance the awareness of the strategic value of space. And then, as mentioned before, government and private sector partnership is a key solution to address all that, obviously because a lot of these priorities are driven by governments, whether it's socio-economical or political and so on. Commercial markets primarily in the value add service, Earth observation, communications, these are the key areas. More pay to play will drive more needs for funding sources, will drive more needs for innovative structure of corporations, innovative partnerships, all around funding and bringing money. Strategic alliance, cooperation, as mentioned before, is key to the success in the future in the commercial markets. And for that matter in government markets. R&D, and I'm talking here about cost reduction primarily, whilst the business case really is driven by demand side, but the cost aspect of it is important to the equation. So the cost to launch, the cost to produce, and the cost to operate. And I think services also will be the key, especially in Earth observation. Spin out other sectors. That's one strategy that MDA has been using in areas like medical and mining and other areas. That's a key one because what it does really, it strengthens the business case a lot for us. And although they are far and few in between, but if you get a breakthrough, it will make a big difference to the business case from a company point of view. So we've got red flags. I already spoke about one. The preferential outlook by governments on the value of space. That, in my opinion, is one of the highest red flags we are facing. The traditional look at cost and schedule and how do we break these paradigms. We see now smaller companies are coming in, especially in the launch vehicle field, with a different approach to cost and schedule and technical. Nationalistic boundaries, and I spoke to that, borders and fences are being built higher and higher. That is a red flag that we all have to work on. And finally, and probably one of the key ones, mission failures. We need to understand the risk and we need to mitigate the risk. And that's all my presentation. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mrs. Pascale Sourisse, who is the President and Chief Operating Officer of Alcatel Alenia Space in France.
Good morning to everyone. Buenos dias. It's a pleasure for me to be here today. I must say that it's certainly both a challenge to have a look at how markets will evolve in the next 20 years, both a challenge and a very refreshing exercise, very interesting exercise, because it makes us look at with different eyes than when we get the constant pressure of financial markets that rather push us to focus on the next quarter results. So I'm very glad to have this opportunity to look far beyond. So to do this, I thought it would be interesting to recall the results of the conclusions of an OECD report that was published last year. That was called the Space 2030, so it was even more than 20 years ahead. Space 2030, tackling society's challenges. In fact, they analyzed various political scenarios for the next 20-25 years and had a look at what the implication would be on space markets. The first scenario they looked at was called smooth sailing. This means a lot of international cooperation, peace, multilateralism. In terms of space activities, this would certainly favor active cooperation between countries, development of a lot of civilian applications, even a very favorable environment for the development of commercial applications, liberalization, new business opportunities. The second scenario, as they described it, was called back to the future. This means, in fact, going back to a bipolar world with, on the one side, the US and Europe, and on the eastern side, China, Russia, and on the third block around India. In this kind of context, the OECD analysis is that there would be higher military budgets, less open trade and investment climate, and development of dual-use technologies. The third scenario they described was called stormy weather. This means, in fact, confrontation, breakdown of multilateralism, more protectionism, bilateralism also driven by short-term realpolitik, economic crisis, ethnic conflicts, massive migrations, and terrorism. This is how OECD described this third scenario. In terms of space application, this would mean much more stringent export control, worldwide increase of space military budgets, and, of course, strong pressure on civilian budgets. In fact, in all these three scenarios, there is a clear identification of a substantial need for space applications in all domains: telecommunications, transportation, environment monitoring, science, space exploration, security, and defense. The difference in terms of consequences for the space business, the difference between the three scenarios is really the relative weight of the different sectors, depending on the scenarios. So what would this actually mean for industry? Of course, our companies have to be ready to take up the challenges corresponding to these various scenarios, take up the challenges of competition. The objective being that we intend to grow our business. We have identified the fact that there are market opportunities in a number of domains. We want to grow our business in all these domains. As you know, there are two big categories of markets, in fact, which are interrelated, but still have different characteristics. In the commercial market, the key driver is competitiveness, going together with perfect quality. So this is one of our major objectives in this domain. A second objective in this commercial sector is innovation, development of new applications, and of course development of the corresponding new technologies. We're focusing a lot on this, in fact spending quite a lot of money on R&D. Could quote the example in terms of application of using hybrid networks, satellites plus terrestrial telecom networks for mobile TV, location-based services that combine positioning systems together with mobile communication systems. Many applications, many technologies could be quoted. Innovation is, of course, critical. Third element, it's been pointed out already and it's very true, a dual-use approach. Our sector is inherently based on technologies and applications which can be used for both the civilian and military domains. Fourth approach, fourth key element, cooperation, which will be extended to new players, which is being extended already today to new players, and this will obviously continue. Cooperation within Europe, obviously, cooperation with the US, with Russia. This has been the case for years and years. Cooperation with new entrants. These new entrants, of course, can be viewed both as competitors, but also partners. And we would tend to favor this second approach, partnering with them. The fifth element I'd like to mention is that there needs to be a strong focus on the regulatory environment to favor the development of commercial applications. Regulatory framework, this can involve a number of things, but in particular, we need to be very careful about the availability of frequencies to launch satellite applications. As everybody knows, there are many users of frequencies. We need to be careful to keep sufficient bandwidth for satellite applications. Second category of business, the institutional market. Well, we intend to, of course, work a lot with national agencies as well as the European Space Agency on the elaboration of the future space policy to tackle the challenges for the next 10, 20 years. This space policy needs to involve an industrial policy. It cannot only look at programs and applications without the consequences on industry. There is a need to take into consideration all players in this industrial policy, the big players, but also the SMEs. There is a need to find ways of financing new developments. There is a need to find a way to not only preserve, but also further develop competences. In this institutional domain, we would also like to see that cooperation is extended far beyond Europe, and the existing cooperations or past cooperations with other continents can be further developed and also can include all these new entrants. So we are, of course, as industries, ready to work on identifying cooperation opportunities on new space programs involving the various interested countries and continents in the world. So as a conclusion, I'd like to point out the fact that, as we have seen, there is a clear identification in our space community that many space applications are needed, but this kind of identification is in fact not sufficiently recognized by the general public and policymakers. And this lack of awareness is leading to a dangerous situation. If we don't address it, we take the risk that insufficient investment is decided in the space sector. And this could in fact lead to difficult consequences in terms of regression or decline of industrial capabilities, technological capabilities. I point out this risk because this is a particular risk specifically in Europe. When you look at the level of investment and how it evolves in Europe and in the other regions of the world, you can see that space investments are in fact developing in a large number of countries, while in Europe it's rather at a stable level. When you're stable and the others are growing, in fact you're going backwards. Actions also are needed from governments to make sure that we can keep or even further improve this regulatory and legal framework. And this is a point that everybody should keep in mind. So, on all these matters, in fact, Alcatel, Alenia Space is, of course, ready to work together with agencies in the various countries in the world, to work with partners to propose new approaches, new initiatives. We are firm believers that space can have a bright future, but this requires that the appropriate actions are taken. Thank you for your attention.
Next speaker is Dr. James Chilton. He is the Vice President of the Boeing Company in their Exploration Launch Systems Division. Mr. Chilton.
Thank you, Dr. Jha, for your introduction. And I'd like to add my thanks for the invitation to speak here and the hospitality here in Spain. It has been fabulous. The topic today is very important, and I'd like to present a Boeing viewpoint, and also some of this is personal. The first thing I'd like to highlight is that if you look backwards 20 years, one thing is very sure, and that is there were many transitions, and none of them, to my recollection, came out exactly the way we predicted them. So almost no space business or endeavor that we've predicted has occurred in the manner that we thought it would. Writ large, we got the outcomes intended. You could look at the International Space Station, and we intended to build a space station together, and we have. But the way we got there was very different than the way originally intended. So from a viewpoint of looking 20 years forward, I would hypothesize that an aerospace lifetime, as far as our perception of how things are going to work in the future, an aerospace lifetime is 3 to 5 years. In any 3 to 5 year period, the way you looked at the future changes drastically. And maybe not drastically from an outcome standpoint, but about how you implement your business model and what actions you're taking. So with that said, I'd like to point out that as I go through a few main points, I'll talk about examples. But the idea for Boeing, and I propose for all of us, is that we have to work on capabilities and things that we know have value as those things change. As our 3 to 5 year decision windows change, we have to be working on things that have long-term value. So we'll talk about a couple of those. Okay, these are the major things you see on this chart. I'll go into a little detail. First is competition is intensifying, and that can be expressed in cost. As the space business has matured, more people enter the market. Clearly, there's a public works aspect to it, but all of us have to work on cost structures. And inside those cost structures, both dual use and pure commercial, there's a lot to that. There's manufacturing methods. At Boeing, we've, in the last 10 years, done a lot of work with lean manufacturing, and that has had tremendous effect on how we produce jet aircraft and, in fact, our rockets and space systems as well. Composite materials were referenced earlier. There's a point where you see dual use. The 787 jetliner is an example of when the commercial market became available for when the composites became available at a price that you could build a large, complicated product, then we declare to do so. Of course, that's a large risk, not a technical risk, but a business risk. It's a significant investment to embark on that. But the idea is 10 years ago, that was not something that was on our radar screen. And 5 years ago, while looking hard, we would not have made such a large investment in that. So the fact that competition is intensifying is going to drive all of us, not just to find different investment funds, but internally we've got to figure out ways to deal with the future as our decision window changes. Consolidation is continuing from inside each nation, but also the markets are consolidating. I'll talk a little more about how to address that. The government markets, although we look at them as perhaps more stable, I propose to you, and could use several examples, that the government markets change inside that 3 to 5 year window as well. And new commercial markets will continue to emerge as a prediction. So I'll talk a little more about that in a minute. So the first thing, one of the capabilities we intend to work on is leverage and integration and synergy. Big words that really just mean don't invest in something you can partner to get, and what you do decide to invest in and do yourself, you have to do it really well. Doesn't matter if you're a large company or a small company, the cost competition is pretty tough. So if you look in the part of Boeing I work in called Network and Space Systems, there's a big focus on low cost and also really understanding the customer, because as these decision windows change, The mental frame we're trying to take is that we're not being surprised by the customer. Things really are just changing that fast, and we have to be willing to change with them. This is a very diverse group of businesses, by the way, so the idea is make sure that you understand all the customers you're serving today, and anything that has value to a new customer, you're ready to offer it. I predict that partnering globally, although there's probably some disagreement here, I think partnering globally will continue. I think if you look at the complicated space systems and other complex systems, even in the defense environment, there is reaching across borders going on. There are some examples here on the chart where Boeing has engaged in some of this. There's a lot to learn from doing it, a lot to learn from our colleagues in Europe and elsewhere who are very impressive in this regard. But I predict this will get, more of this will happen than less. We have a lot to offer each other, and expect that to continue. In fact, it's a survival imperative in many ways. I'd like to talk a minute about the government markets. I'll use NASA as an example in the U.S. 3 years ago today, what we refer to as the vision for space exploration was not announced. We were looking at a future in the U.S., and especially in Boeing. We believed that we were trying to figure out a way to fly the shuttle to 2020 and sustain the ISS with international partners, working together with them. Of course, that's changed drastically, and it was really less than 3 years ago. And that's driven, in our world, a lot of change. Some examples of that: NASA's recently awarded a COTS procurement, commercial off-the-shelf space transportation services. We view that as a very good thing. That's akin to development of aircraft in the early part of last century. And that's purely cost. That's a different way of investing in space transportation. If you look at the last 10 years, the RLVs, the investments in EELVs, and other places around the world in space lift, there was a lot of predictions around commercial satellite technology and all that didn't come out the way we anticipated them. The investments may not have came out exactly as we intended, but there was much learned, and the big lesson was you're going to have to be flexible inside 3 and 5 year time windows. And I would also use the International Space Station as an example. If you look at the last 10 years and even the last 5, the method in which we intended to assemble it and sustain it has been changed a lot. The Columbia accident, the prowess of the Russian Space Agency to sustain it, the things we've done with software, and I hope many of you saw Bill Gerstenmaier's presentation this morning about accomplishments there. But the idea here is, even though some of us may think of the government market as not changing as fast, it also changes pretty rapidly inside a 3 to 5 year window. So we're going to have to work on all those capabilities. We're going to have to partner. We're going to have to recognize that an aerospace lifetime for our view of the future is a 3 to 5 year proposition. I'd like to throw in one other thing. I think it's incumbent on all of us over the next 20 years to be intentional about promoting space commerce. It's not only the kind of businesses we're in today, but for there to be a future in space, I think we all have to contribute to forums that allow these ideas to emerge. To quote a colleague from Virgin Galactic, the internet was not invented for Google. Although it often seems that way, doesn't it? So the idea here is something will spring up of this infrastructure and all these business models, and it's incumbent on all of us who have an interest in space to view that as a good thing and promote it, whether it's exactly in your company's domain or not. And this chart is an example where we're attempting to promote lunar commerce, although that seems far off. The ideas born of that may have value. So in summary, the challenges that emerge are likely to be enormous. They always have been. Our view of them will change every 3 to 5 years or less, and we have to work on the things that allow you to weather those changes. Make sure you're integrated and working together with others. Don't expect the government to be as stable as we think, and all of us should be intentional about incubating new ideas. The Burt Rutan, the Jim Benson of Space Dev, all of those entrepreneurs, I quoted a couple in the U.S., but there are many worldwide. That's good for all of us. The rising tide will lift all our boats. Thank you for your kind attention.
Next, we have Mr. Nicolay Sevestiyanov. He is the President and General Designer of Rocket&Space Corporation, ENERGIA in Russia.
Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги.
Good day, dear colleagues.
Сегодня 4 октября,
Today is the 4th of October,
ровно 49 лет назад был запущен
and
первый спутник,
it's exactly the 49th anniversary of the launch of the first Sputnik,
и реально началось освоение космического пространства.
and the age of space exploration started.
Я хочу сказать, что для нас особенно это приятно, потому что первый спутник был запущен нашей компанией,
I would like to say
«Энергия».
that for us it's a very pleasant occasion because the first Sputnik, the first satellite, was launched by our company, ENERGIA.
И за эти 49 лет, конечно, много, так сказать, прошло изменений в области космических исследований.
And there have been a lot of change in the area of space exploration during this last 49 years.
Сегодня космос предоставляет огромные возможности для общества.
Today, space provides enormous opportunities for the society.
Прежде всего, это, конечно, вопросы безопасности.
First of all, it has to do with security issues.
И под этим понимаются не только вопросы обороны,
And I mean not only defense issues,
но и вопросы задачи наблюдения Земли
but also Earth
Погоды.
observation, weather,
и других аспектов.
and some other aspects.
Второе – это наука.
Second point is the science.
Космос реально сегодня позволяет нам лучше познать развитие Вселенной.
Space research allows us to better understand the development of the universe.
А значит и историю, и значит и развитие цивилизации.
And the history of the development of the civilization.
Ну и, конечно, сегодня космос становится коммерческим.
And of course, today space is being commercialized.
Но по-настоящему космос коммерческим станет тогда, когда кроме государственных инвестиций в космос придут частные инвестиции.
Can seriously talk about commercial space when, besides the government investment, we also have serious commercial investment.
А для этого мы, работающие в области космоса, должны понимать, что нужно обществу для его развития.
Purpose, we people working in the space community must have a clear idea of what society needs in terms of space research and space exploration.
Сегодня космос уже активно внес вклад в информатизацию общества.
Today, space has made a significant contribution into computerization and informatization of society.
И мы видим, что реально сегодня спутники связи – это тот вид, который стал по-настоящему рентабельным и активно развивается на коммерческой основе.
We can see that today communication satellites is a kind of space activity which pays its own way and is being developed on a commercial basis.
Сейчас на подходе системы наблюдения как коммерческое направление.
Nowadays, the Earth observation systems are becoming a commercial field of space activity.
Конечно, для того, чтобы спутники работали на орбите, нужны транспортные системы, поэтому
to maintain the satellites in space, we need transportation systems.
Поэтому сегодня коммерческие системы, информационные системы позволяют развиваться в коммерческом направлении именно средством введения.
That's why commercial systems allow us to further develop the launch vehicles.
И главный вопрос, конечно, коммерциализации. Главные вопросы коммерциализации.
The major issue involved in the commercialization.
Это, конечно, обеспечение нужного качества услуги для
providing the required level of services for the society.
Это доступ к этой услуге.
It's providing the access to that services.
И это стоимость услуги, которая доступна бюджету покупателя.
And this involves the cost of service which would be accessible to the customer according to the customer's budget.
Все это сегодня реально осуществить, если мы будем применять новые технологии.
All this is feasible today if we use new technologies.
И я вижу, что именно коммерческая составляющая в космосе будет именно в основном зависеть от внедрения новых технологий, которые позволят решить вот эти задачи.
Commercial component in space will very much depend on the innovations which will allow us to solve these problems.
Задачи качества, доступа и себестоимости, низкой себестоимости.
There's problems of improving quality, accessibility and cost.
Ну и РКК «Энергия» сегодня активно работает в области пилотируемого космоса.
And ENERGIA today is working very actively in the field of manned spaceflight.
И мы, конечно, мечтаем, или, скажем так, стремимся
And of course we strive
также достичь реальной коммерческой привлекательности пилотируемого космоса для общества.
to make the manned spaceflight commercially attractive to the society.
И сегодня действительно
And today
реальная основа появилась для развития именно коммерциализации космоса.
a realistic basis for commercialization of space.
И эту основу как инфраструктуру стали создавать государства-участники Международной космической станции.
And this basis, this foundation is being led by the participants in the International Space Station.
Мы видим, что сегодня начали летать в космос космические туристы.
And we can see that today the space tourists began to go into space.
На коммерческой основе стали летать разные страны, которые не входят в страны-участницы Международной космической станции.
Various countries which are not participants in the International Space Station use commercial flight services.
И сегодня, конечно, вот коммерциализация полетов пошла через системы кораблей «Союз» и «Прогресс».
Today the commercialization of space is using Soyuz and Progress systems,
которые изготавливаются в нашей компании.
which are manufactured by our company.
Но сказать, что полностью сегодня наш пилотируемый космос коммерциализирован, конечно, нельзя.
But of course it would be a mistake to say that the space today is fully commercialized.
Потому что, конечно, все равно основной вклад в российскую пилотируемую космонавтику идет из федеральной космической программы.
Of course, the major investment in the Russian space program is done by the Russian government federal space program.
И коммерческие полеты сегодня скорее добавка
And commercial flights
к общему финансированию, чем основа этого
today are
финансирования.
still a useful addition to this investment rather than the basis of this
Что
program.
нам нужно сделать, чтобы действительно коммерческий пилотируемый космос стал базироваться именно на коммерческих полетах?
What we need to do to make space really commercial, so that the commercial investment became the foundation for space.
Нам, конечно, надо, так же, как и в спутниках связи, в спутниках наблюдения, активно внедрять новые подходы и технологии.
Communication satellites and Earth observation satellites, we need to introduce new technologies and innovations.
И прежде всего, конечно, это многоразовость космических средств.
And first of all, we need to make the space vehicles reusable.
Сегодня мы разрабатываем проект «Клипер»,
And today we are working on the Clipper project,
в развитии проекта корабля «Союз».
which will be a further development of Soyuz
И
spacecraft.
он позволит решить уже задачи значительного снижения себестоимости полетов в космос.
And it will allow to significantly reduce the cost of access to space.
И главное, расширение доступа к полетам в космос.
And the most important point is it will expand and increase the access to space.
Но если мы решим задачу снижения себестоимости и доступа для пилотируемых полетов, то мы тут же должны решать такие же задачи для доставки грузов.
And if we solve the problem of expanding the accessibility and lowering the costs of manned space flight, we must also look at the same problem of cargo, for the cargo delivery to space.
И сегодня на замену грузовому кораблю «Прогресс» мы начинаем создавать систему паром.
And today, based on the Progress spacecraft, we are beginning to create the Parom system,
которая также позволит значительно снизить себестоимость доставки грузов и будет основана на принципах многоразовости.
which will also allow us to significantly reduce the cost of delivering cargo to orbit, and will also be reusable.
Ну и я хочу сказать, что, конечно, вот эти проекты, они сегодня
I would like to say that today these projects
нужно объединять не только инвестиции для реализации их проектов, но и интеллектуальные инвестиции.
Must pull together not only financial investments, but also intellectual investments.
И вот, что касается «Клипера»,
As
то
for Clipper,
сегодня Мы начинаем этот проект совместно с Европейским космическим агентством,
Today we are starting this project in cooperation with the European Space Agency.
понимая, что именно этот проект должен значительно расширить доступ человека в космос,
And it's our understanding that this project must
сделать его
significantly improve the manned access to space
экономически эффективным.
and make it cost efficient.
Ну и несколько слов я хотел бы помечтать о ближайших 20 лет в области пилотируемой космонавтики.
I would like to dream a little about the next 20 years of manned space flight.
Главный вопрос, конечно, развития цивилизации – это энергетика.
Of course, the major challenge for today's civilization is power production,
Энергетика и ресурсы.
power and resources.
И сегодня мы видим такой бурный рост цивилизации, что
And today we see such
интуитивно,
rapid growth of civilization
становится понятным, что рано или поздно мы должны будем использовать энергетические и другие ресурсы Солнечной системы.
that it becomes clear on an intuitive level that sooner or later we'll have to use the power resources of the whole of the solar system.
И в первую очередь ближайшие планеты спутника Земли и Луны.
And first of all, we must start with the nearest heavenly body, the Earth's satellite, the Moon.
Сегодня идут исследования в этой области,
Today, studies in this field,
но реально мы сможем сделать это тогда, использовать ресурсы, когда будут созданы эффективные транспортные системы между Землей и Луной.
show that we can realistically use lunar resources when we have established a transportation system, reusable transportation system between the Earth and the Moon.
В этом случае понятно, что первый этап он будет с использованием государственных инвестиций,
Of course, it's clear that the first phase will be based on the government investment,
но реальное освоение может быть только с использованием большого количества частных инвестиций.
but realistic industrialization of the Moon can only be possible with attracting a huge amount of private investment.
И здесь мы должны опять внедрять новые технологии,
And here we must again introduce new technologies,
прежде всего на многоразовой основе для
first of all reusable technologies,
создания таких систем.
to develop such systems.
Ну и в заключение я хочу сказать
And in
следующее,
conclusion, I would like to say the following.
что сегодня много скептицизма есть по поводу будущего пилотируемого космоса.
Today there are lots of criticisms about the future of the manned space flight.
Многие говорят, зачем
Some people say,
нам
why?
пилотируемый космос, когда мы можем его исследовать с помощью автоматов.
Why do we need to send men into space while we can do robotic exploration?
Да, исследовать космос планеты мы можем с помощью автоматов, но
Indeed, it's
осваивать,
true that we can do robotic studies and research of space.
мы будем все равно с помощью пилотируемых систем.
But the actual industrial development of space will be done by manned space systems.
И я хочу привести пример из российской истории.
And I would like to give you an example from Russian history.
В 30-х годах прошлого века
Back in 1930s,
развивалась северная авиация,
there was a huge effort to develop aviation in the northern regions of the Soviet Union.
и многие говорили, зачем это?
And some people were saying, why do we need to do this?
Абсолютно бессмысленное дело.
It makes absolutely no sense,
За полярным кругом невозможно жить.
because nobody can live in the polar regions.
Но потом были открыты крупнейшие месторождения газа, нефти,
But later on, very huge deposits of gas and oil were discovered there,
других минеральных ресурсов.
and some other mineral resources.
И полярная авиация стала основной технологией для освоения и
And the polar aviation became the major technology for
для освоения
exploration
этих месторождений.
and development of these resources.
Вот по такой аналогии мы видим развитие пилотируемого космоса.
So that's an analogy for the future development of space.
Но для этого мы должны создавать экономически эффективные транспортные системы.
But for this purpose, we must develop economically efficient transportation systems.
Спасибо.
Thank you.
Our final speaker this morning is Professor Sir Martin Sweeting. He is the Chief Executive Officer of Surrey Satellite Technology Limited, a company which has revolutionized the way we look at small and microcells.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Now I need to try to summarize the next 20 years in about 20 seconds. Nevertheless, the challenge before us is very great. To look ahead that far is extremely difficult. And indeed, if I knew what the markets were going to be in 20 years and how we would best configure ourselves to do it, I certainly wouldn't be telling you. If we can now... Thank you. First thing to do is to perhaps look at what is space business. I mean, clearly it is supplying the consumer, and the consumer comes from two main areas: the government, which are indeed a customer and a consumer, and the general public. And there are many examples of this, the general public being served through value-added interfaces, broadcasting, and various other applications. But space is not yet a mature business. Satellite communications is perhaps the most commercially advanced of all the sectors. Earth observation and remote sensing are not yet commercially viable without government customers. Navigation and timing is a potential business with a strong downstream element to it, but the upstream is yet to be proven. And microgravity exploitation is still in a research phase, and space tourism, as my Russian colleague just mentioned, is just emerging. And really planetary and interplanetary exploration is still driven by science. So let's look ahead. 20 years is difficult. Let's start with 5 years. I mean, let's just take the next emerging area of Earth observation. Clearly, I think we will see this develop strongly, and I think the lead given by Google Earth is an important trend. But one of the key things that we will have to solve with that source of data to make it really useful is data freshness. And this is going to require far larger numbers of spacecraft and taking a very different approach if we're going to really utilize the sort of services that a company like Google Earth and its compatriots are going to offer us. So let's look ahead 10 years. Well, perhaps navigation and timing services combined with communications, as was mentioned, is going to be one of the key areas. But perhaps space tourism is going to be an ability on a routine basis, but not just for brief suborbital hops and not just restricted to the super rich, like space was 20 years ago, restricted to superpowers. We need, in order to make tourism more widely accessible, to bring down that cost to 100,000 a flight. That's more than I have in my back pocket, but nevertheless, there is a large community that will be able to afford that level of flight ticket. And it's the same as flying first class, perhaps 20 years ago on an aeroplane. And, you know, the International Space Station, what is the use of the space station perhaps in 10 years' time? And without any political comment, maybe it is as a space hotel, is where tourism and the ISS are going to actually come together, and that will turn out to be the real use of the ISS. So 20 years, now we're getting really into the distance. I think we will need, as my colleague from Russia indicated, we need to look beyond the Earth, and we need to have sustained human habitation on the Moon. We need to be able to develop in situ sustainable life support and the preparation of manned exploration of Mars and the exploitation, not just the exploration, but the exploitation of foreign bodies, perhaps starting with the asteroids. The current rate of progress is far too slow. If we're going to indeed make any progress in this latter point before 2050, we have to increase the tempo of robotic exploration and preparation. We need at least 10 times as many robotic spacecraft traveling to the Moon, Mars and asteroids in order to explore and prepare for exploitation. And this requires a dramatic cost reduction in the cost per mission. So how do we do this? We start with the robotic exploration of the Moon, understanding that environment. But it is important that this activity is fully inclusive. And it includes not just the developed space powers, but also the emerging and developing space powers, so that the exploration beyond Earth is a fully inclusive activity, and using the types of novel cooperations that have been demonstrated, for example, in the DMC. We have to recognize, of course, that not all partners can contribute equally, but even small contributors from a wide range of countries must play a critical role through specialization. And it is a cooperative approach to interplanetary exploration, with the whole being greater than the sum of the parts, that I think leads us to success. And in order to do this, we have to change the economics of space. And there are going to be business opportunities both looking from space down to Earth and from space out from Earth. And in government incentives, as we have seen in the opening up of the western regions of the USA, are required to expand that frontier. But once those incentives expand the frontier, commerce and enterprise will follow, and services will be provided to those first colonies that are either on the moon or Mars, providing communications, ferrying supplies and exploiting the resources. But we have to change our thinking of space and our approach to space if we are going to do this. And it is a combination. We have to recognize competition and cooperation, and together have co-opetition in order to ensure that we have the sort of incentives and motivations for these exciting futures. Thank you very much.
We are over time, but I'm going to use my privilege as the moderator to continue this for a few more minutes and give you an opportunity to ask questions. So if there are any. If you're okay.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Professor Sun Guorui from China, Beijing University of Aeronautics and Astronautics. But my major is law. Just now, two speakers. For example, the only one female speakers and another speakers from Russia. They said something about commercial flight or commercial cooperation, about the legal framework and others. I concerned if the different countries they did something for spacecraft. If the intellectual property, how to cope with the intellectual property? Thanks.
Okay, if I gather correctly, I think the question is how do you cooperate internationally in these competitive market? Maybe I'm not summarizing well, but that's what I understand. So anyone wants to take that? Okay, Mr. Auque.
I'm not sure to understand 100% the question, but I try. And I think there are two schemes. Either it is a commercial venture, for instance, what Astrium has done with ISRO, which consists in teaming to put an Astrium payload on an Indian platform. Okay? So, this is a commercial venture, and we define the agreement to market this product and the way we share the revenues. Or, second possibility, which is the case for all which is linked to space station today, where it is an agreement between agencies. And so, generally, these are questions of barter. That is to say that in exchange of a contribution in kind to the investment in the space station, the country which has made the contribution is given a right to use the space station. So these are, in my view, two ways: commercial, and it's a pure shareholder agreement, or through agencies, and it's more kind of barter. I'm not sure I answer your question.
Thank you. Any other question?
Thanks. For example, if
Excuse me, I think we need to give other people some opportunity. Any other question? Sorry. I think we are running short of time. I'll allow you an opportunity to discuss bilaterally your questions, so please stay behind. I just have last question, which is for any member of the panel, and that is how important you think are military markets for space industries. Do you think they actually decrease the competitiveness in the industry or increase it? And if yes or no, why do you say that? Because sometimes most of the programs in military are cost-plus programs, and there is a tendency that industries become non-competitive. So, but at the same time, they develop technology. So what's your view in terms of, are they helpful or hurtful in the sense of competitivity? Okay, Pascale.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that in Europe, unfortunately, military programs are not that much cost-plus. Huh? So, in fact, we need to take a firm commitment on schedule, on costs, on prices, basically, and need to deliver. I think military markets play an extremely important role in our industry as drivers for new technologies. Military applications are extremely demanding in telecommunication, in Earth observation in particular. So this is leading us to develop solutions that military customers can afford, but that commercial customers could only afford after a number of years and when costs have gone down substantially. So yes, indeed, we think that military programs are drivers for technology development, and we have seen that throughout our business and are absolutely reusing technologies, for example, flexible payloads, active antennas developed for telecoms, very high resolution solutions developed in Earth observation lead to obtain technologies that are really very attractive to reuse on a lower cost basis than in commercial markets.
Thank you. Before I close this session, I just have a small announcement. IAF is trying to increase the relevance of IAC and IAF for industries. And in that context, we have organized a lunch, networking lunch for industrial participants. So some of you have received invitations. Those who have not received and would like to come, you can see me. This will be at the Hemispheric. I'll urge all the panel members to be there, so this will give you another opportunity to network. It's from 1 to 2:20 in the Hemispheric on the first floor. With this, I'd like to thank all the panel members they are all very busy people to take time and come here, and also thank you all for coming and joining us this morning. Thank you.